Well, you've got to have three kinds of history to help you to understand it. First of all, you've got to have political history, because political decisions are taken as to when television shall start and how it will be organised. Secondly, economic history is very important because part of the television system is associated with advertising, and therefore the advertising can only be understood if you know what goods are on sale and what the advertising markets are like. And thirdly, I think you do need cultural history because of the content of the programs themselves.
In the olden days, the belle of any used to be the toast of fellows, one and all. Now that television's at our beck and call, I'll say, my soul.
Well, it started in 1936, and it followed a long period of experiment between rival television systems. The most important early pioneer of television was Baird. Baird was a very down-to-earth Scotsman who loved to play about with apparatus, bits of string, really not in any way a scientific person. But he was the first off the mark, as it were, and he developed a mechanical system of television.
It is now 12 years ago since I produced the first little flickering television image. Today we have in London a regular television service twice daily with thousands of lookers in. Television has grown from a scientific novelty to a commercial service.
Mr. Hartley, will you be good enough to explain the difference between our last experiment and the one that you now are going to demonstrate?
Here we have the beginning of a television picture. In this lamp house, we have an ordinary 900-watt incandescent lamp with a reflector and a lens to put the light from this lamp in a brilliant flood on the back of this scanning disc. Now, the light from these small holes passes on to the face of the subject being televised and sweeps across them very rapidly, completing a whole painting of the face 20 times a second. Now you'll notice as I turn the disc that you can see the spiral of lenses moving up the face of the disc and then starting over again. Now I'll turn the motors on and you can see it come up to speed.
This picture was recorded and synchronized with sound in the General Electric Company's House of Magic at Schenectady, New York, and was produced on the apparatus at which you have just been looking.
One of the very large business concerns, working a little bit later, developed an electronic system of television transmission. And there was really a trial between the two systems, as there was a trial, between different railways in the 19th century. And ultimately, the Baird system lost out to the electronic system. And that was the system which really became the first system that was employed by the BBC after the development of regular television programs in 1936.
The real breakthroughs made by the electronic industry, which used electronic scanning, and of course television came to England in the early 1930s, but only to southeast England, which just as today was going through a kind of boom as opposed to all the unemployment and slump all through the rest of the country. And the fact that television sets were chiefly owned by well-off people in the southeast meant that a particular kind of program was produced for them. And if you look at some of the early films and early records of first of BBC television, you'll find it's rather like a Night Out at the West End.
This wonderful age, the future than all the world is a stage. First you heard, now you see, and you wonder what the next thing on the list will be.
Well, if you go far enough back, of course, you come to Sir John Reith, who's the founder of the BBC, an extraordinary character, a Scotsman, very puritanical, very curiously radical in some ways.
He operated from this room, so you're sitting in Lord Reith's room. He was a towering figure, not only in stature, he was 6 foot 3 or 4, I think, but in the way he organized the BBC. I mean, he started, of course, with nothing, and from scratch, he created an organization with all the problems of dealing with the politicians. I mean, his involvement in the 1926 general strike was crucial at the time, much regarded by some politicians as being too crucial, in the sense he read the news bulletins himself, which I don't do on the whole these days. He was very involved with the government. He announced actually the end of the general strike, and people thought at the time he probably was too involved with the government. But he at least grasped the nettle of dealing with political government and how you resolve that in the interest of broadcasting the truth to the public.
John Reith had a very strong feeling that no broadcasting should be entirely entertainment-based. He believed in a certain amount of entertainment, but it had to be kept in a balance. And also, Reith believed that you had got a responsibility to put across certain kinds of programs in order to educate the public taste, which might otherwise not have been put across at all.
Independent television.
There ain't gonna be no war. So long as total war means and is known to be the total destruction of both sides, however great and powerful, involving perhaps the destruction of all mankind.
Well, the story of the setting up of ITV is the most interesting story in the whole history of television in this country. And it really began with a group mainly of Conservative MPs who felt that there was too much control in England of most aspects of life and too much nationalisation, and that it would be important, therefore, to have a breakthrough in some kind of field to show that you, having come back into power in 1951, were really going to be different from the Labour Party, which had been in power between 1945 and 51. That group of MPs found it very difficult to denationalise most other things, or indeed to get rid of many of the controls at that time. But the one bit of the apparatus of the country which you could hope to, quote, free, unquote, was the BBC. So that was the first element in the story.
I wouldn't argue that it was necessary to have a commercial competitor to make the BBC wake up. But that's a long argument. What I do think is that the coming of a second network was very good for the BBC, in that it had to think about its programming, it had to face up to competition, and had to really wake out of this sort of torpor that it got into. And the impact of ITV on the BBC was very considerable.
Now, the object of this game is that you take the balloon. When I give you the word, you pat it up in the air as high as you can get it, because whilst it's in the air, I want you to get into an inner tube, pull it right over your body, place it down on the floor, and then pat the balloon up again. Do the same thing on the second and the third. When you've got to keep it in the air with one big high pat each time. Now, to beat the clock, you've got 50 seconds. It's up to you. Start patting the balloon now. Well, start again. Up it goes. Pat it. I wouldn't throw it. Over here. Yes, he's down again, mother. Quick. Yeah, he made it.
In general regard, I would say that the BBC actually has benefited enormously from competition. It wasn't the perception that they had, who were running it at the time. I think you kept us on our toes. I think we've delivered to you standards you have to try and aspire to. And I think it's been good for both of us.
The Avengers was a series which started to be made in the 1960s by ABC Television, and it almost immediately established a style and pace of television direction which perhaps in British television never quite been equalled. It was instantly recognisable, it was rather quirky, it was not quite serious, the characters were not obviously meant to be real, and yet it had wonderful panache and approach.
Yours are blanks. Mine aren't.
Love, my rose.
Jedes Mal ich wach, denk ich an dich, mein Lieb, mein schöner Ros. Ich denk an dein Lächeln, ich denk an deine Augen, ich denk der schönen Stunden. Jedes Mal wir Kuss, bin ich hin.
Steve.
Oh dear, do you think I frightened him?
The BBC had a police series called Dixon of Dock Green, which was this incredibly nice figure who helped old ladies across the road and children in difficulty and so forth and so on. And it was departing more and more from reality.
Good evening, all. Well, I'm the mug tonight. Chaps at the station are putting on a concert at the church hall, raising funds for the orphanage. I tried to change my turn of duty, but no. They're all enjoying themselves, and Muggins is pounding the beat. Mary's gone with Andy, of course, and, well, that's the best news of all, because at one time it looked like it was all off between them two.
Proposals then made that we should do a series of programs which got nearer the truth of police life. For instance, the relationship of the police to criminals, to informers, the fact that policemen are not necessarily always totally under control, that they lose their tempers and do things of that sort. Zcast, in that sense, started off as a sort of documentary program. I think it became very stylized eventually and went away from the documentary. But the first few numbers of Zcast were very close to what police activity and police life was in Liverpool and in the big housing estates around Liverpool. And it caused a total sensation because one had never seen police portrayed in this way on our screens before.
And the moment that Smith and Weir find that character, I want him brought in here. They do know that, don't they? Tell them I'll be counting the minutes it takes them to get here.
Yes, sir.
Not too pleased, eh?
Not happy, he said.
What's up, then?
Oh, Mr. Barlow lost a witness and been held sort of responsible.
All right.
Information room. Smith won't reckon being on it either.
No me no more.
Said Victor Warren, say again.
Victor 1 Wilco.
Roger that, Victor 1.
What do you think, then? We're in the field having a kip.
Like
If you want this bloke, somebody should have fetched him himself.
After all, we're near enough there now, anyway.
You don't lie. Go to yourself, Smith. Day before yesterday's time enough.
What are you on about?
Barlow!
Oh?
Well?
What?
Do you hear the message?
Yeah.
Checking on us, seeing how we're wasting time.
It fitted into a trend in drama, which was away from what you might call literary drama, to the drama of everyday life. And here, one of the very important figures was a Canadian called Sidney Newman, who had been very important in Canada and had worked in the States. He came across to join ABC Television, and he started a series called Armchair Theatre, which were very realistic, dealt with situations of everyday life, and again were immensely exciting. One had not seen anything quite like this before.
What do you know in New York City? Is that the mail? I met the postman on Western Avenue. I thought I'd save him a stop. You have this letter with a New York City postmark. Ruby! When we were little girls, it was fun to open each other's letters. Mother wanted us
Did she
to.
mean for us to go on our whole lives?
She meant for us to share our lives, Wilma. I think she knew that someday we'd be left here with nothing but each other. Look, I have a letter, too. You may open it. Go on, you open mine first.
From Good Homes magazine.
Well, I don't think my subscription's run out. Go on, open it.
I'd rather open mine.
When a family dies out, Wilma, custom's all that's left to treasure. You can't break it so lightly.
Just this once.
Oh, it can't be that personal. It's typewritten.
Everybody's so busy these days that typewriting's accepted as personal.
There's something in this letter you don't want me to see.
I can't tell till I've read it, can I?
All right, Wilma. Give me mine, too, please.
The Television Act, when it was first passed, which is now the Broadcasting Act, does place certain obligations on both the IBA and indeed on the programme companies to do their contracts with the IBA. I wouldn't myself describe these as constraints, quite so much as positive obligations, which guarantee, or which set out to guarantee, the quality of the service and the range of programmes provided. The Act's really quite specific that there shall be a wide range of programmes scheduled of high quality, and that the scheduling of these programmes should take account of the time of day and the day of the week and so on, so that the companies and indeed the authority cannot allow all one kind of programme to be scheduled at a particular time. It has to be a mixed diet.
What we've always said is that we try to recognise that in the vast range of opinion, that at some time and at some place, most voices, if not all, should be heard. Now, when 20 years ago, we used to have to balance within programmes, i.e. if you put a Labour spokesman and a Conservative spokesman had to be there in the same programme. It was recognised reasonably and mercifully fairly quickly. This made for bad programmes and boring programmes. Over a long period of time, I think we do try and balance. I mean, it depends where you stand, of course. And we are constantly besieged with people saying we're too left or too right or whatever. And we're never going to get past that, nor should we.
I start by asking a very simple question, is not what the law is it fair? You see, you could achieve a balance, let us say, between the political parties on a particular issue. And yet, if there's a strong view in the country which isn't represented in the political parties, I think you'd be being unfair to the public by not representing the argument and not having a large section of the population who takes a particular view represented.
We have legal responsibility. There are several acts which control the responsibility we have to maintain impartiality in our news reports. We're obliged by law to be impartial on all reports which deal with matters of political or industrial controversy. We're also obliged by law to be impartial when we're reporting on public policy. And that covers virtually all matters of public concern.
We live in a very, very free society, so of course we expect our television to reflect and enhance those freedoms, and it does to some extent. I don't think it has done enough. I believe that there are many problems, the problems of Northern Ireland, the problems of the ethnic communities of Britain, which have been badly served by television, very badly served by television over long periods of time before the broadcasting authorities belatedly relax some of their rules and attitudes.
Hugh Green, who was Director General the third before me, said in the early 60s that we were not balanced about race, that we thought we should make a stand that racism was wrong, and I would argue that since he said that, we've adhered to that view.
One of the things you've got to bear in mind if you're in charge of programs and have to make that kind of decision is that the viewers are watching what goes on the screen in their living room, so to speak. And that you might get a head of the family who would not flinch if he saw certain sexual acts or representation of nudity or various actions of one kind or another on the screen in a cinema, would take it perfectly calmly because it's dark after all and everybody's watching the same way. You don't know who else is watching. But to see it in the company, let's say, of his wife, daughter, mother-in-law, is very disturbing. He is, as it were, a voyeur who is caught in the act.
A good example of the difficult decisions over sexual matters that one has to take would be the case we did dealt with an issue we dealt with, the morning after pill. In order to explain what this issue is about, we decided, we thought we had to show a drawing of the female body and show the point at which the sperm and the egg united and the point at which the morning after pill had its effect. Now, that's central to a very difficult and important moral issue of life and death. But I received a large number of letters from people who were very offended by us, both by us showing the diagram and even talking about matters, about sperms and eggs and so on. Now, I understand that, and I don't want you to offend anybody, but I thought it impossible to do the issue without explaining it, and it was vital to do the issue. But it's in that way, inevitably, on matters of sex, that you offend. The important thing, I suppose, is you must offend to a purpose.
I can think of a recent one where we were doing a report on glue sniffing, the problems of glue sniffing among young people. And we found in our libraries some film which had been shot by someone else, but had come into our library, of children apparently glue sniffing. They either were glue sniffing or they were simulating glue sniffing. I decided against using that film, although it illustrated the subject, because I believed that you were doing one of two things. Either you were encouraging the children you had filmed to do something which society believes is bad for them, or you were simulating something which was not real. And I decided on those grounds not to use it.
That those of us in television are very much alike. And we are representative of only a small type or class of people in this country. And there's a danger that we get isolated. Well, I don't have any financial worries. I love more money, but basically, compared to most people, I'm quite well off. I live in a middle-class area, up West London. I am as untypical as most people are of the country, and there is a danger that we get so involved in the world of television and here in London that we get isolated. So that's the danger. No, I would say we're doing quite well, but by heaven, there's an awful lot to do to get better.